Okay. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, my voice is loud and clear. I want to speak about distant transmissions to and from the beyond. Initially, the title was called Distant Transmissions from the Beyond, but I wanted to say to because you see that anything the mind can consider, it can in some sense find an expressive intelligence in. I want to speak about the presence of the cosmos. I want to speak about the mind of man in the cosmos. I want to speak about if the mind of man could perhaps be in an intelligence that is beyond its recognition. So imagine you open your eyes and you're in a place, you're in a country you've never been to, and everybody is speaking a different language. You will be shocked. You will feel out of place until you suddenly see that once you learn the language, the reality has meaning. So, what I'm trying to say is that sometimes communication moves along from one position to another. I want to say that the body is alive, it moves through matter. The mind is alive, it moves through thoughts. The world is alive, it doesn't need to move. And honestly, the relationship of the known and the unknown, the visible and the invisible, it comes down again to a fundamental duality that your psychology is holding. Certainty comes from clarity of the foundation. I feel our minds provide us with a sight prior to any sort of subjective or objective movement. I feel our intelligence functions strangely in the stillness and silence of being as well. You see, intelligence seems to be a non-dual phenomena. It is the animate relationship between various points. Now, either we are studying the world as if we broke it up into pieces first, or we are seeing how we can crack one piece. There's some people climbing towards heaven, and there's some people climbing down heaven. There's some people who are trying to break heaven, and there's some people who are trying to build heaven. It is not too much of a far-fetched idea to entertain the notion of building a paradise. Your psychology, who you are as a person, seems to be where the boundaries of an experience come from. Therefore, any person who wants to go into heaven, they have to ask themselves what is going into heaven. And so, at least in the Abrahamic traditions, they spoke of the unknown. They had a sort of unknown factor, you know. And the unknown factor made anything known uncredible, not credible, you know. I'm going to create a new word right now and let's call it incredible. IMCREDIBLE, you know, incredible. Sounds up. You see, it has to do with how much you've wondered about intelligence surpassing your sensory perception. If you're someone who's never wondered about it, perhaps you haven't found the reason to, you know. And this talk will seem like stranger than fiction to you. But if you're someone who's ever attempted to figure out where how intelligence appears into meaning, pretty much you've someone who's been sensitive. Here's the difference between being life sensitive and not being sensitive. As someone who is life sensitive, they hear the cries of the fallen. That means you want life to be maintained at a certain level, so you're sensitive to its change. People's ego, due to its nature of being a belief, a sort of container, contains them, gives them a standard. That means your ego is like the first dot where you're drawing lines from. Now, here's the interesting thing. My interpretation of the notion of self, in other words, I thought that it was a sort of sense of self that is going from A to B to C to D, a sort of linear, consecutive movement of the change of personality. That means for a long time I entertained the notion that I am growing in this life and therefore I am expanding, right? Most people, you ask them what is this life, and this is how you can tell someone is spiritual or not. Go ask them, what metaphor would you put life in? And if they put all of life into a school, they think like the purpose of human existence is just to progress and advance and grow. It's as if those people who are still philosophically in school, how can my mind had to challenge the idea that what is happening to me is me. That was the great mystical battle I had to fight at some point in my life. And it is impossible to. The thing is, the issue with the evidence of truth is that you are the evidence. You know? If I ask you, is there something alive in the cosmos, you would look at me and be like, yeah, man, I'm evidence, But what I mean is eventually communication has an instantaneous mode of being aware of it, and there is a sort of multidimensional spectrum based hierarchy, whatever. So think of it this way: there's a short journey to truth and there is a long journey. The short journey is internal because it is reverse engineering the cause. Okay, the long journey is external, which literally means we as a civilization have to start exploring this vast unknown forest of cosmic phenomena around us. And so our civilization is so interesting that it gets defined by its findings. Back in the day, somebody found something in the tribe, something outside, and brought it to the tribe, and it was like a new fruit or something. And then, that guy became the first person written in the history books of the tribe as the first person who brought a watermelon to the tribe. Do you know what I mean? Like, even though there weren't books at that level of primitiveness, but I'm saying, like, the idea is of bringing. You are finding something, bringing it back, finding something, bringing it back, rather than endlessly expanding into the void. It's like, thanks, infinity. What do I do with you as a concept now? It's like, what do I do with the infinite? You can only see what's in the finite. What you pretty much, in the studying of the finite, it's like you find the infinite in the finite, and you find the finite in the infinite. I'm not joking. They are codependent conceptions. That means right now, you as a human being, all the ideology you have, it can be said that a majority of them, I think 2/3 of how a person thinks, it's codependent subjective points. That means if I ask you, who are you? And when you get to the details of who you are, if you were to write it on a piece of paper, you would be moving from material position to the animate. Pretty much like people want to see how you're alive. They want to kind of see why. How can I tell you? It's like the question, why am I alive, is more interesting than how am I alive. Simply because it has to do with more of the change of the overall structure. So I am saying it like this. I see many human beings that in some sense these human beings are warriors of the linguistic realm. You don't know who these people are. I call them advanced communicators. They're around us. It's very fascinating. Even though we all appear in the human species, the way our intelligence moves is not in one mode of humanity. We are all building something by existing here, and we don't realize it because the songs that we sing are based on the past rather than the freedom and the permission of the future. What that means is you could be a man who in some sense feels has found the greatest truth, but if you see your greatest truth is eclipsing the truths of the future, that is when you go to war, ladies and gentlemen. You go to war with the language that imposed the restriction in the mind of the human being in the first place. How dare we shape life when it's changing? You see, the mind assumes it's kind of fascinating. Your mind and body, there is a greater than sign. In regards to the mind is given permission, a multidimensional permission. The body is given a singular dimensional permission, a one-pointed dimensional permission. That means if you ask me who I am, it's as if you only care for the answer of that moment, rather than seeing people are not the words they speak. These words that I'm sharing with you right now, in comparison to the actuality of the image and the experience I see behind my eyes, it's as if no man can write the sunset in language. They can write the after effect. This is what really I find is for the mind of the advanced writer. The advanced writer is no longer writing for himself, and he's no longer writing for the world. He is letting the unknown reveal. He's letting it's as if order was the twin brother of chaos. And order looked at chaos and said, I cannot leave until you do. That is the philosophical dualism we find ourselves in. And I've seen many philosophers take it into different positions. For me, I decided to acknowledge very simply. That means if right now these talks are kind of like, believe it or not, they're not my real talks. They're not moments where I am truly speaking. I am polishing my concepts for you. Because in some degree, the savageness of ideology is unnecessary to be heard. Some ideas, you have to just watch them die alone. You have to literally see that inefficient sense of yourself fade into the abyss of space. And there has been moments where I've reached the edge of the language threshold to a point where eventually you come to a patient mode, a mode of patience. You wait. You become a waiting watcher of life. And how can I tell you there's a reason Beethoven was obsessed with his music? Because he saw a way out of his past through it. That is the value of the artistic vision, which our species is forgetting. It's as if economy came and devalued art, and so now people are forgetting why art was there. We are getting more content with walls without having colors on these walls. I remember interviewing a very incredible. I mean, it was the first time I was meeting her, but her intentions were incredible. And it was this artist named Jackie Comrie, Jackie Comrie, to be short. And I remember asking her about that. She was drawing a mural on a wall, and in the middle of it, me and a bunch of friends, for a certain documentary purpose, we were in some sense speaking to her. And so I was interviewing her. And believe it or not, as much as I speak, I don't think I'm too bad of an interviewer, So I asked her, like, how is your art having an influence on the world around you. And she told me the fact that there is a new color in front of your eyes, it evokes and moves a different part of your neurology. It's anytime a civilization is being denied access, literally, literally, it's like when the colors of the world fade, that is a sign of extinction. It is a sign of kinda cutting the beauty of the world out of your daily view. For me, there was a time where I felt I had to hold language strictly. Literally, most people, when I see them how they use language, is that they hold it strictly. They're choking the language. This is why when people think about communication and expression, and think of your expression, just to relate it to the title of this talk, is in some sense an echoing expression. Imagine excuse my language, but for the purpose of the example I'm going to tell you, imagine like some guy shouts in the street, "Fuck you," something like that, right? So that sentence, that sound that guy's making, it generated a wave. Now, even though, even though I feel the energy eventually, the sound changes, the wave generated changes, but I feel the intention and the generation of the sound, the intention echoes on, right? So what that means is, language, emotion lives longer than language. Okay? Let me tell you what I mean by that. I mean that when an emotion arrives, it may take 10 minutes to leave you, but when a thought arrives, it can more instantly change. And the reason the emotion takes longer, because that emotion was sparked due to a thought emerging in your moment, which brought forth memories. And literally in that moment where you're like, whoa, so I'm here right now, and this magnificent biomechanism of my mind, of my brain, is being able to remember 10 years ago what happened to me. A memory is there, you know? There's in so many, there's something tragic happening in Western media, that it is just focusing, because they are under the impression sex sells. They are just focusing on the relationship of how can I tell you, it's like there are so many types of human beings on this planet that even if the whole entertainment industry, all the companies gathered around to capture it, it will not be enough. The stories of man rise and fall like civilizations. Do you know right now I'm speaking to you? It's very fascinating. If you truly ask me who I am, I would be silent. You know why? Because the words could never be. The memory comes, but I am not in the memory. I am a new person now. So therefore the past is no longer the past, even if it arrives. This is why time travel never existed when the concept of time changed. Heraclitus said, "No man steps in the same river twice, and it is not the same man, and it is not the same river." And what he means is that literally every moment of your life, you are again the undefinable witness, watching phenomena pass by. For me, I'm telling you, psychology is maybe the psychological experience of life is a tiny percentage of your moment. Language was a tool. It was Language was a gift from the gods, but it did not come from the clouds. It was a gift of the gods from the inner skies of man. That means from within came the consciousness to evolve outside. So I find that we are completely wrong about any idea we ever have in a changing universe, yet the purpose then moves from truth. If you ask people, why do you go to work? He's not going to say, because it's my truth, man. It's like that's not why you're going to work. We have replaced truth. We have pushed truth aside because it was too perfect to find. And so the endeavor and the hope is gone. Let me tell you how you kill hope: by taking your attention away from it. By somebody taking your attention. This is why I'm saying you got to be self-aware in today's era. It's like mass idea worship. It's like people are like, as I remember talking to someone, and the guy had a ridiculous business where the business was succeeding evidently, where he was selling zombie survival kits, as if like a group of people are waiting for the mistaken mutation of the species. Like, what the hell? And so I in some sense see, anytime an ideology possesses a person, they are not themselves. Their soul is trapped in a world where they have to keep lying in. They have to endlessly try to be something else rather than realize, hey man, you're already on the roller coaster ride. This life is a roller coaster ride. Like I'm telling you, literally, our biological existence provides a it provides a mindset that, okay, I'm hungry, I gotta eat. I'm thirsty, I gotta drink. I'm tired, I gotta sleep. You see, the body has a sort of program we have to live by. You have to take care of your body. And the way nature is so ingeniously designed that if you don't take care of your body, your mind sees less from the world. This is the value of health. This is why I'm saying there should be a complete transformation of the educational system, where children in the first 5 years of life learn about survival. And then it's like first it's like, how can I say it? Middle school is learning about your physical survival, Elementary school is learning about physical survival. Middle school is learning about, in some sense, the survival of your mind. And high school becomes, in some sense, the dance of the soul, I guess. Now, I want you to see that if somehow we said there is 0. Whatever amount of zeros you want, 0.001% chance that you may be right now a complete antenna. Your intelligence is not just an animal dwelling, it is also a receiver of intelligence as intelligence. So you are an intelligent moment of reception, right? And so me and you right now, we are hovering in space. In a space where once you step out of language, you meet the void again. I have met the void in many moments of my life. Literally every time something is taken away from me or there is chaos, I see the void. And I, in some sense, say, how can you fight space? It's as ridiculous as there was this kind of Greek, I don't know, it was a general emperor or something, like, but this Greek king was in some sense, he ordered his army to attack the sea, to evoke Poseidon, to provoke Poseidon, the god of fluid dynamics, I find what the society is waiting for is to find new dimensions. But we want to find new dimensions in a game that maintains the values from the past, but also allows enough freedom for the future. That means if we want a good future, we gotta create complete freedom. We have to give 100% full freedom. What that means is like an empty page of ability. That means if you want to be defined in regards to the future, you can be anything you want. You can literally be anything you want. The future is a blank piece of paper, we draw it in. Now, the past. What the hell is the past? And the past is the conservative, traditional nature. You can say the past is why you remember your ancestors. Because you are opening your eyes in a world that was here before you were in it. Do you see what I mean? That means we have opened our eyes in the world. And the world's eyes were they were open before ours were. Think of all those people that when you were just a newborn baby were staring at you at the hospital or wherever you were. You see, it's as if a child doesn't realize it's being invited by the world. Your civilization may seem like a cruel machine in 2019, but I'm telling you, soon it's going to transition into, in some sense, not the big brother, but the older brother of man. That means the older brother doesn't come to his younger brothers and say, I'm going to do what you're doing for you. The older brother says, you attempt yourself. But if you need me, I'm here. So imagine children being born in a civilization where if they needed the civilization, it was there for them. And I want to see this kind of civilization emerge. I want to see, it's pretty much the question, like, imagine, let's say, standard extinction. Okay? Standard, it's all nothing. Okay? Let's imagine. So we imagine that, okay, there's no point. And so let's say that was the truth. And we get bored. We get bored of that truth. And then we wonder, what if? Why not? There's the story I always share where I say there was a philosophy teacher who on one of his exams wrote a bonus question that said why question mark. And different students gave answers. Some people said why, what a profound question. Some children wrote Abrahamic stories of themselves. Some children wrote secular stories of themselves, you know. And so many answers were written, many attempts were made. The teacher comes, and once the students ask who got the answer for the bonus question, you know, the teacher says one of you did only. And that one guy stands up to tell his answer. And they ask him, what was it? And he says, it was why not? I saw the problem as a mirror of how I'm looking at it, not what the situation is. You begin to see moments where how much of it is self-generated and how much you're a pure soul. Let me tell you when you become a pure soul. When you have nothing to lose because you have found your eyes in the void. That means it was very strange. I remember the first time I had this kind of experience. Where I was just sitting and for a moment I felt I was no thing. I felt the moment was the only thing that was there. The contents in the moment were whatever relationship. It was as if you look at the world and it's changing and you're like, wait a second, how am I seeing change, you know? And then the questions of the true origins of man's psyche arise. And we see Carl Jung tell us, march into the unknown. That was Carl Jung's the greatest effort of his lifetime. That means the only way you can honor Carl Jung's work is if you make an effort at the unknown. So civilization is inefficient now. Mr.Within is saying we're all alive once. Why not see its efficiency? Why not just try and see what happens? So many moments in my life I've just tried something and it's happened. You know, it's like not all experiments end up in failure. A majority of them end up in success or in revelation. And the notion of this creature that is just opening its eyes and like, whoa, I'm made of stuff here in a world of stuff. You know, I have consciousness, right? So we are that kind of creature. We have created ourselves in regards to how the spotlight of attention has made the character an actor in its world. So anyways, what I'm trying to lead to here is that I find eventually we as all human beings, we are right now in the era of ideal worship. Everybody has in some sense a sort of thing they're identifying with, which in some sense brings forth their personality and their psychology. And so what happens is we will still dwell because we think language hides truth. You know, we think the whale of thought is beyond language. We are in some sense a creature that is in an era of ideal worship. And I have been born, Mr. Within has been born in a moment. Like, I feel it's like I was born at the right time because I see where the civilization is heading, and it's a transition point. No longer we need people like Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Dalai Lama. We no longer need preachings on be nice and love everything and be compassionate. It's like we don't need that kind of marketing of truth anymore. We need to realize truth is an unknown field. It's as if that moment where the king realized he had lost his voice, but he had not lost the voice of his action. And you see, it's like, in what was that movie? Like, I think it was Lord of the Rings or something. The king looks at his men and just runs. And when the king runs, it's as if the world has dared to step further. You see, the mobman, Hitler was a messed up dude. Okay? But he brought forth something which had nothing to do with who he was. It was just something where, like years after this man had died, historians and the grandchildren of historians were contemplating, you know, its value. And what it was it showed the mob mentality's destructive quality. It showed how if we choose to all unite, it could get destructive. It could get fucked up if we're all following one fucked up person, you know? And so no longer the world needs followers of other people's ideas. You need to wonder about why your mind is here, not what's outside. You start within first, because what is within is instantaneous. It's the receptive mode. Reception is instantaneous. Hearing is instantaneous. Have you noticed? It's literally like silence, then a sound emerges, and whoa, subjective landscapes are projected. The mind receives when you are still and silent. If you literally stop doing anything, like if your mind was an antenna, or like your phone, its signal bars would just increase if you are more still and silent. Anytime you're still and silent, the attention stops for a moment to wonder. I want you to think your attention is pretty much the energetic presence of us, of what we say, you know, to be poetic, the soul. Okay? And what the soul is it is not a noun. And pretty much, how can I explain to you something that isn't something? It can only happen in the negation. So when you go see ancient poetry, they are negating. It's like we are reverse engineering, not engineering towards truth. We are reverse engineering towards truth. We have no other choice. It's like you know we are sight in the middle of nowhere. What else can you do? You just go by the program, but then you realize you have a sort of evolutionary consciousness in the program, and then the free will becomes the messenger of how can I tell you is you just stop being something for a moment and you feel the divine will. When I say feel, that means conceptually it's incomprehensible, but emotionally there is something. You know, emotion is a very unique thing. I consider when I become incredibly emotional, I consider that to be a divine moment. Because when emotions intensify, there is something in the psyche, behind the eyes of the person, a certain idea of themselves is dying. It is dying or changing, or a new idea is emerging. This is why there isn't only one kind of way to cry. Did you know that? There are tears of sorrow, and then there are tears of joy. There are tears of suffering, and then there are tears of bliss. So I pretty much came to what I feel was my mind's heaven's gate. And it wasn't a gate I was looking for, but I feel I came to the conceptual limits of my experiential reality of existence. Literally, as an experiencing moment, I felt I reached the edge of my existence. Literally, I was looking at existence and pretty much waiting for the world to reveal itself to me, and in some sense the world didn't. So I stood, it's like I felt I stood, a time span of eons in front of the heaven's gate of my mind. Literally the origin of my consciousness. I couldn't conceptualize it, but I found it. Do you know? Or as the poet Rumi says, what you seek is seeking you. What you seek is seeking you. The truths that you run after, they have first run after you. Desire is not just fascinating to have, but it's fascinating to just study like a wild animal. Do you know? So let me tell you what I mean by that. Right now, if I ask you, are you an animal? Most people would be like, hey man, what's your words? Who you calling an animal? you know? When a sense of self fades, what is left is the witnessing moment, which is your whole moment. So right now, it's like you are your body, and then there's the room you're in, which you have some awareness, sensory awareness of, right? So imagine right now your attention not just being limited to just your sight, that your mind's sight, in some sense is non-local. There's many things. It's like you're not thinking about your heart right now, but your heart is beating. You're not thinking about your lungs right now, but they're doing their job. You're not thinking about the biological existence. You feel it is just it's doing what it's doing. But I eventually realized you have to honor every moment of life, because it is by nature revelatory. That means it's as if, how hilarious is it that it's as if there were many revelations, yet one was heard, one entered the mainstream. Did you know there were like 13 technologies of flight, and the wings of the plane was just one? It's sort of arriving at a deep, I don't want to say deep, but you find yourself content with nature. Just like how there's so many things in this life you can't control, you acknowledge. You acknowledge the limits of your intelligence, and the moment you do, you can control it. If you have not acknowledged the problem, don't even ask for the answer. If something is not internally real for you, it doesn't matter how much you externally give the evidence. Imagine like somehow there was evidence found for, for God, like exact evidence, right? And you brought it and the evidence was not seen. So I'm telling you, it's all narrative. Stories are battling for truth in man's minds. in man's mind, in mankind's vision. And so when you take responsibility for your mind, you have to be responsible for what it generates. And so you are in some sense wondering, okay, I seem to be a multidimensional being with a subjective component to my moment and an objective component of intelligence to my moment. So what do I do with this, right? This comes the question. I'm alive, I'm here, what do I do? It's like, wow, what are the actors' lines in the play of the future? In the theatrical performance of the future. And the actor will see the future is not something to think about, it is something to bring about. That's it. It's action oriented. It's not too much ideology. Language and thoughts and ideology are like second-hand citizens when it comes to action. Action is superior to ideology. Because action is what ideology wants ultimately. I've had moments where I've had a certain ideology be very true and comfortable for me, and there's been times where I felt very uncomfortable. I pretty much when the concept of God was introduced to me, it felt like authority. And let me tell you, as long as society has laws, the wonder for the transcendental other will be alive. The invisible other, as some say, the invisible other, which Mr.Within would say is, I feel it is the reflection of you. I feel there will come a moment where you will see you have known nothing else aside from you. When you realize that, a shocking revelation will come. Your whole behavioral stance towards the universe will change. You will no longer chase. You will no longer reduce. You will just look back as if it doesn't matter if it's birds or let's say a rare species of a certain animal that's going extinct, that we want to see thrive, or whether it's the human being. You just let nature live. And this should be the ultimate law, the freedom to exist. And so many people, when they are lost in social and economical programs, and societies where they have to be a gear and a cog to survive, it's as if it's tragic. It's as if it took us 4 billion years to evolve a human being with a great mind and an imagination, but the human being is wasting its days in doing labor that robots can do. And so where is the mind of man? I know we have minds. I know we walk in society looking at each other as if we have each found our minds, not lost them. We have found them. But I am telling you, for how long can we act in front of the truth? Because someone who truly sees you, you will no longer lie to. The presence of the cosmos is the ultimate inspiration towards humility. It was a given. And I'm telling you, you are not a thought. There are many moments throughout the day you have where they are just presence. It's just presence. There's no thought, I'll tell you a moment where 100% no one ever has a thought. This is a moment of enlightenment, guys. That moment where you've poured a cup of water and you're thirsty and you're literally drinking from that water. That moment is so pure. There is no how can I tell you? It's just action, presence of action without any story to amplify emotion. So I'm telling you, we are oscillating between individual consciousness and collective consciousness all the time. It's just a matter of interpretation, a matter of value giving. That means if an extraterrestrial, just let's say imagine, flew to you and said, hey man, it's so silly. The extraterrestrial's like, Hey man, what sets your how would I animate this? I think I have brought forth a metaphor that is ungrounded. Pretty much, I'm try to say that in a new moment, any value can be a new value, and that's where the psychological freedom, pretty much for the egoic nature of the human design, is. So you gotta kind of realize you gotta stop the act. That's the first. It's like the first approach to honesty. When people tell you be honest, it's like don't try to be honest. Try to not be dishonest. Be whatever you are naturally, but just for example, wonder about what actions matter, what actions don't. You see? Because I'm telling you, we are civilized because we hold the door open for our fellow species member. That is what sets our civility. That's what changes us from being savage animals. So what it is that I think this should be the idea that this savage idea, but any human being who's violent, imagine was thrown across a wall into just a kind of area where it was like there was nobody there. Imagine such a storyline, you know? And so it's as if violence goes back to the nature of the animal. That means we stepped out of the cave. We didn't go back into the cave. We stepped out of the cave and we started building skyscrapers. That's the type of creature we are, you know? And so if something in modern culture, the cultural program alive at the time, you hear the command of starlight in your eyes. You abide by your nature. You access a non-dual intelligence, the non-dual side of your intelligence. The non-dual side of your intelligence only exists because it trusts reality. Anytime you distrust something, it's same as lying. Did you know? Most people don't realize they lie because they feel the other has lied first. They are cruel because they feel the other has been cruel first and they've paved the way for their justification of their reaction. The psychology of the species must be studied now. So again, let's go back to the idea that this mind of yours is an antenna. And so through this antenna, we are receiving phenomena and translating it into subjectivity. So we can say the purpose of the brain is to try to be a thought. And the purpose of thought is to be a mirror for that which is truly here. Because I'm telling you, it's like, it makes total sense. You think the cause, like imagine, let's take the creator perspective here. When I say the creator perspective, you can just see it as like any religion or philosophy or ideology that relates to that. Even cause and effect falls under the creator perspective. Once the thought is observed, the thought is hollow because the primary value given to the moment has come from within, not without. This is how kind of ownerships on a psychological level works. It is the fact of a new relationship. We can say the ceremonial intentions of even certain cultures, the ritualistic behaviors was simply to follow the string and pull the string of the unknown. Okay, they were trying to cause something to bring forth a sort of effect. However, the effect, if it chooses to be an effect, will not question. I find it doesn't matter how much you try to be an alpha male in a beta male civilization. Do you know? It doesn't matter how much you try to be advanced in a world that still is having problems with its trash. Right? So right now I'm telling you the problems of the world are simple physical actions. That means realistically, let's say because when I'm speaking to people who I feel their imagination, they have real noticed how their imagination has a life of their own, a life of its own, right? I'm not speaking to an empty universe. Because without something being full, there cannot be emptiness. The cup has to be full first to be empty. Cause is one action oriented. What that means is all the branches of knowledge come down like an inverted triangle to one point. And that point is action was life. Anytime you act, you will feel alive. Anytime you don't act, you will feel more internally alive. There are many pictures we paint, and the best thing we can do is not to believe one moment's truth. Reality is not about finding an answer per se, at least for the counterculture of our current civilization requires to ask questions. Elon Musk said one of the most liberating things that I was like, this dude is more enlightened than, the most enlightened yogis, and he doesn't realize it. He doesn't realize why he is alive until he brings it about. How incredible. Anyways, Elon Musk shared this incredible idea that in some sense you got to ask the right question. And the hard part of the entrepreneurial endeavor is to asking the right question and in some sense finding the accurate reality to work in. So civilization needs to ask new questions. And so these questions will not be asked if the language of the civilization is restricted. I don't see the dictionaries getting bigger and bigger, and that's a tragedy. Do you know? It's as if that's when academia has dismissed all the ways that language is moving in culture outside of school, outside of universities. We are missing out on the richness of our world by not having a method to extract it. What I mean is that we are walking past the greatness of our lives, not noticing it. It's in every moment. It's your attention. How do you hold your attention? Right now, as I'm speaking to you, I'm holding my attention like a sword. But sometimes when I am in some sense receiving or more on a sense contemplative directive, then it becomes more as if like, I don't know how to tell you. You can study language in front of your eyes, but you can also study language through complete silence behind your eyes. The movement of language, as if you are trying to interview your imagination to just see what kind of mind you were born in. What kind of intelligence is this truly? There is so much unknown. Let me tell you, everyone should have a freedom to wonder. Let me tell you why. Because we created fire. We created language. Do you see the fascinating thing about fighting over linguistic truth as people? How it's language that leads to wars, yet fighting over it is the meaningless part. But we cannot ignore how our ancestors walked. So as much as I have my own values, I have to see how the world is moving. You know, and any person who's just a student or just a teacher, in some sense, their life becomes. Let me tell you, kind of very simple way. Is there more unknown in the universe, or is there more of the known? If there is more unknown, I recommend the playful, efficient, visionary approach. A culture that gives freedom for great ideas to manifest. That's a good civilization to be in. A civilization where the child is just waiting to be a part of, not something to run away from. A civilization that we can, in some sense, when our future generations open their eyes, they will look back at us and say, well done, ancestors, well done. You know, right now, the way we're living, the future generations are going to open their eyes and they're going to be like, holy fuck, like the past was clueless. Excuse my language, but sometimes emotions need to convey. I find there is a treasure behind every human being's eyes, and they have to find a way to contribute to the vision of their civilization. Don't just have a physical contribution. Like it's like there are people who build schools and hospitals. You know, my grandfather was one of those. And in some sense, it was an action of helping the external. But I find everybody can help the internal because thoughts take less energy to move. Like it takes more energy to move your body than it takes to, for example, think of another thought or move your attention. Right? So this is why I often give, not often, but I guess like I'm more inclined to give these talks in the night because it's like halfway through the day there's a point where I start kind of going with the decline of my energetic being. So what it is that if your body is more important than your mind, you will think the point of life is to work hard. If your mind is more important than your body, then you won't work hard. You will work smart. You will wonder about what the mind can do for you. You begin living life in accordance not to your truths being a tank going into this unknown jungle of various ideologies in society, but it is in some sense a performance. How you walk in the moment and observing that, you learn more than any book. Me personally, my imagination, especially when I'm tired, I get silly. But the thing is that there's a flexibility with the relationship of how thought moves. So I can say that there in certain moments of the day, thought moves at different speeds for me. But it used to, let me tell you what I mean. I mean that I would wake up and then I would just be conscious. I would just keep like a record. Like I was like, how can I tell you? As I was watching from the moment of being everything that was happening to me through the day. It was like I was a viewer of my own movie of life. Okay? And throughout the day, I began noticing kind of like how this intelligence moves. It's like every day you wake up and you enter an Iron Man suit and you move. And this Iron Man suit is not per se the physical body, it is the ideological body. Your ego is your ideological body. It's your subjective self, as I say. And just noticing these subtleties of the texture of experience. Pretty much imagine experience is a chemical, one kind of chemical, and existence is another kind of chemical, and their chemical reaction, which is completely transforming both, is being you. In certain ancient Persian mystical poetry, it was said in a way where, like Rumi said it actually, he said it, the light of the sun hitting a candle that is lit. So this is his vision of course, the Sufi tradition acknowledges finding the beloved. They not only believe in a sort of ultimate monotheism, but they believe that their path to truth is the love of God authorizing them. So they become behaviorally oriented in regards to wondering about the transmission. And what a transmission is just it's opening your eyes. That's it. It's just it's fingers pointing to what you have not seen yet. And I find in today's society it's okay to break the sky a couple times. It's okay to wonder about the constitution of your ideological reality, which is how it's divided between, if you think about the future, it becomes imagination. If you think about the past, it becomes memory. But pretty much it is a moment where phenomena is generating. So eventually language has to acknowledge this instantaneity of silence, which is the world. So what it is that I find when the secular society says something has arose from nothing, and of course, the Abrahamic society and the religious society they say that it was all from the beginning. It was only God, so it was all source. This is why, in the religious viewpoint, you feel God is watching because God was here before you. But the secular society feels God was here after man was here. So in one manner, a group of people, they don't see language ascribed to society, to phenomena in the same way as other people, you know? We are each in our own room at first. But what I'm trying to get to is that eventually you reach the end of the war of language in your mind. You stop searching for thought anymore as a thought. And you realize you could never be a thought, because how can a thought think that it's a thought? It's hollow. It's an illusion. There's this whew, what can be said? From silence has emerged sound. But silence is not just nothing. Silence is the space for everything. I find a human being who finds a sort of ultimate contentment with silence and stillness automatically is liberated from all movement and noise. It doesn't matter how the world moves next. Your eyes are the texture of being the whole moment, a sort of whole witnessing moment. You are the space, not you are also the space, not just what's in the space. That's what I mean. There are moments where certain phenomena appears from the unconscious to the conscious mind. What that means is you may be sitting somewhere and a thought appears, or a sort of thing. You first of all reach a certain point where you start realizing your presence. You cannot become a true explorer of your intelligence unless you find the presence of your intelligence first. And that true presence of your intelligence is non-dual and non-conceptual. It moves beyond the language threshold. So I'm in this situation where I'm like, okay, what do we do with, imagine everybody got enlightened, so what would all these enlightened people do? I'm like thinking like that, right? And I realize it would be a fallacy. It's as if the law of yin yang applies everywhere. I find it that there's an image of the yin yang circle where it's like one circle, and then there's these two circles, one black and one white. But I'm telling you, imagine instead of being one black circle and one white, there being endless fractal yin yang circles. So that's how I see nature. It is an infinite balance. It is a balance of manifestation. It's as if man blamed himself. Before man blamed himself, he's like, "Who can I blame?" And he started blaming the world, the planet. And as we blamed the planet was like, "Don't blame me, blame the galaxy, the solar system." And eventually it went blame the origin of why everything is here. And you see, it doesn't matter how we paint the past or the future. It is the present that's really the true gift, is it not? The gift of a waking moment in a conscious life. That's the best kind of gift to get. The gift of vision, which I was very blessed to somehow, I don't think it even had to do with who I heard speak in my moment. It had to do with the concepts that came to me when I shifted from no longer just being a character that is encaged by animalistic instincts. So we have a chance to be an animal, and we have a chance to be beyond the animal. And so this grandfather, Cherokee grandfather, this tribal chief back in the day, he in some sense, his grandson comes to him and says, "Grandpa, tell me a story," this chief elder. And this chief elder looks at the grandson and says, there are two wolves inside of you. And these two wolves are fighting. One is black, one is white. And then it was in that moment where the kid was like, which one wins? And the grandfather says, the one you feed. You know what that means? That means wherever your attention goes ultimately becomes the next step of your truth. This was in like very well known in military, like many generals in ancient times. It was a balance of attention between heaven and earth. Attention was key. Where attention went, opportunity arose. And at the same time, illusion could have arose as well. The importance of honesty is not because you're being honest for others. You're being honest because your intelligent moment deserves its natural self. That natural self is so powerful because then, you know, you will see the light of, you will see beyond our sky. But you will see it in a way, not that we have traveled beyond our sky, you will see it in a way where the sky never existed. The concept was void and direct experience and true presence, the cosmic attention, the commander of starlight stands. In some sense, we can just totally forget about all the past ideology and just say, hey guys, we're just creatures of light. Without light, we don't see anything, so we are just creatures of light. Let's forget everything else, yeah? You know, it's as if our true nature is just light in our eyes. What can we do? You know. Our state of mind suggests the type of communication we receive. And I find the solutions we need to life are ones that lead towards a sort of self-actualization. So in certain moments you're getting certain views of yourself and you're acting upon. So what that means is behind your eyes you're seeing like various parallel realities of the moment and you're acting upon one of them. So the mind has a sort of multidimensional fabric to it. So all I'm saying is that we don't know what the mind is. Because when we really look at existence, we need that space. We need something to have happened to measure. If nothing happened, how can you measure nothing? It's as if it's prior to the concept of even needing a ruler. So it reaches a point where it's like nothing and then something and then nothing and then something. And so what is this bounce? What is this bounce of civilizations endlessly arising? And it's like, so you think about it and you're like, okay, so what's the point? What's the point of being on a sphere in the middle of nowhere, you know, and trying to go beyond our skies? What is the point? It's as if we are, by nature's design, caged in on the same spot. So human beings are all creatures, and not just human beings, so many other creatures is. So what it is we are, in some sense, the eyes of the ecosystem that has subjectively separated itself from it. But we are still a natural part of our environment. The only difference is we're just in rooms that just separate us from nature. As the mind is studied, kind of like, as Henry David Thoreau says, it's not what you're looking at that matters, it's what you see. When our civilization truly sees the value, the value of its presence, then it moves beyond personality. And yeah, I feel I've painted the picture well enough so far. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. And as the writer of Tolkien, at the age of 14, under a table in the UK, wrote, "Not all those who wander are lost." Blessings, guys.